everybody. Welcome to another episode of 10,000 Roads to Financial Independence. Today, I have Tim Bratz. Tim is a CEO and the founder of Legacy Wealth Holdings, a real estate investment company that acquires and transforms distressed apartment buildings into high-yield assets for their own portfolio. Tim's current portfolio exceeds 4,500 changes all the time, with a valuation of more than 400 million. Working in real estate, Tim has built a passive business and created a residual income that allows him to live the lifestyle of his choice. He's here to educate and empower others to become financially free through commercial real estate. Welcome to our show, Tim.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the introduction and for the invitation to be here, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've seen Tim talk in some conferences before. And very impressed with how he built his empire of real estate holdings. So very excited to have him on here to iterate that kind of journey. So Tim, we always ask our guests, when you're growing up, who actually impacted you the most and shaped the entrepreneur who you are today?
Yeah, I would say when I was growing up, my dad kind of lived that rich dad and poor dad lifestyle. You know, he didn't come from money at all. He had a full-time job. He was a police officer. And then at the same time, he had a part-time business. And that part-time business, because he showed up, he did what he said he was going to do, you know, and he followed through on a lot of things, kept on growing. And it reached a point where his part-time business made, I don't even know what the exact figures were, but I know it was at least 3 times as much money as his full-time job did. And I remember him, you know, looking back and him saying, you know, go to school, get good grades, get a good education, get a good job, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, but you have your own business and it makes way more money than what your job does. And you've had it for half the amount of time that you've had your job. And I just remember thinking like, I want to go and make money. And that's what really appealed me about business. So yeah, he was a big inspiration in that front and really, you know, just kind of gave me a lot of perspective into entrepreneurship versus going out and getting a job.
Yeah. And then because when we're exposed to it, we're more able to kind of accept that concept. And Tim, you mentioned to me that you rarely had a W-2 job ever. And tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, I tell me how to W-2. I had as a dishwasher at a party center in high school. I worked at a bar and had actually it was like a bartender and a bar back or something in college. And then in college, I started getting this entrepreneurial bug. I always like cut people's hair. I always like burned CDs and sold them to people. And then back in the days of Napster and Audio Galaxy and all that kind of stuff. Oh. And so like, I always had something that I was making money from in that capacity. And then, you know, I started a painting company when I was a sophomore in college. And over the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college, I had about 12 of my buddies working for me over the summertime. They'd paint houses and I'd go do the sales and all that kind of stuff, and just realized I really liked kind of creating my own schedule, having my own decision, you know, and at the same time, I've had other jobs and people telling me what to do and like having to raise your hand to go to the bathroom, having to raise your hand, you know, crazy. Hey, when can you come into work? When you got to be here when the bell rings, you can leave when the bell rings again. You get like, and just, you know, having to ask for time off. Like I'm an adult. Why do I need to ask for time off from anybody? I'm a grown man, you know, and that it just doesn't or never sat with me that an adult should have to ask permission to another adult for any of this stuff, right? To live their life. And so I was not a very good employee ever. I always wanted to do my own thing. I always had my head somewhere else thinking about how could I, you know, create and build something that I controlled and I owned. And so that's always been my thing. So I knew that I needed to make money to do that. And when I was going through college, 03 to 07 the market was going crazy. So I decided to get involved in real estate because everybody was making money in real estate at that time. And, you know, so I graduated from college in Ohio. I moved out to New York City and lived there for about a year, got my real estate license because I thought that's how you got involved in real estate. And I started brokering real estate. And so I worked with a brokerage firm that brokered commercial real estate, like retail leases, office leases, some building and investment sales. But really, you know, I was a low man on the totem pole. I came in and just started brokering really the bottom of the barrel type of listings that they had. And even the dumpy listings that they had, I brokered one of them. Took me a few months to do it. And it was a 400 square foot space that rented for $10,000 per
Whoa.
month.
Okay.
And on a 12-year lease term with
Wow.
4% annual increases on the rental rate. And I just remember thinking, like, this landlord's doing something once, and they're getting paid on it for the next 12 years, almost
Right.
$2 million over the next 12 years.
Yeah.
They're going to make money. And this guy had, the owner, the landlord had like 8 retail spaces, you know, and they had 10 stories of apartments above it. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to broker real estate. I want to own real estate. That's when that bug, that idea of residual income really took grasp. It's when I really conceptualized it. And I was like, I need to own rental real estate. So I moved down to Charleston, South Carolina, and in 2008, and then the market completely collapsed right before I started buying property. And it was a great position. I was 23 years old and was able to go in and I mean, you had your pick. It was completely opposite of today's market.
Right.
Any property you wanted, you could buy for pennies on the dollar. Any of them, even the ones that weren't foreclosed on, but a lot of them were owned by the banks. You could buy them for pennies. But money was very hard to come by, at least for me, right? I was a 23-year-old kid, never done a deal before, no background in real estate, in the worst housing recession ever. Nobody was really lending me money. So you had to kind of get creative on that stuff and talk to friends, talk to family. I bought my first house on my credit card, just kind of got, I figured it out. I didn't let hurdles and obstacles get in the way. Wherever there's an obstacle, there's always an opportunity.
And then how did you get your friends and family to kind of even invest? Because everybody's kind of hurting in like 2008 and people kind of scared, like, clearly you're very good at salesperson, especially doing the brokerage and everything comes along with this. But how did you kind of get them to invest? Yeah,
I mean, that first deal, nobody would, right? Nobody did on that first deal. The first deal, I called up my credit card company and asked them to increase my credit limit. And then I wrote myself a balance transfer check and then used that cash in order to close on the property. I just got resourceful in other ways. The first rental, and I flipped that house, made about $13,000-$14,000 in 110 days. And I was like hooked on real estate. And then, so then I had this little tranche of money from my credit card and the money that I made on that. And I did it again to another house. And then all of a sudden, I started wholesaling real estate, contracting it, and then selling the contract. And I was able to find good deals. So I did some other deals without having to use my own money or my own credit from then. And I built up a little bit of experience to the point where then I could go to like my brother, who's, my dad was like, no, not giving you any money. My brother's like, I'm dumb enough to give you some cash. So here's like, he gave me like 50 grand or something. And at the time, doesn't seem like a lot, but that you could do some damage with $50,000 in 2009, And so, I spent a lot of that on education, right? So it was investing in myself kind of a thing. And then helping with some operational type stuff, marketing, dollars, and that kind of jazz. And then, I bought my first rental property with seller financing. So I got educated on how to do seller financing and how to get creative with financing structures. And I bought it with seller financing. I used private money. I found a lady with 25 grand in her IRA that she loaned to me. And, I didn't use any of my own money for that first rental property, and got seller financing at 3.5 or 4% interest rate on majority of the money. And then I used this 401k for the down payment, paid her 11%, but my blended cost of capital was only like 6%, Right. And so the property yielded far better of a return than a 6% return. So I was able to then make it cash flow. And then I just, as you do more deals, you get more eyeballs on you, and people are seeing you do a deal, and they see you do another deal. And a lot of people are looking at you saying, is this going to be a flash in the pan? Is this going to be the next get rich quick that Tim's pursuing and that he's trying to make money on? Or is he actually going to see this one through? And, and as I got more and more experience, and as I talked about it on social media, and as I talked about it and showed pictures and all this other stuff, all of a sudden people started coming to me and saying, hey, I got 100 grand. You got any interest in taking it? I don't have the time. I don't have the bandwidth in order to do the investing, but you do. Let's come up with some sort of a split, and you do the work. I'll bring the money, and we'll split the deal somehow. And that's how I got my first private money lenders. And then it just starts compounding. You start doing more and more and more, and then people tell their friends. They start bringing more of their own money. You start meeting other people who are watching. We live in a very voyeurism society. Even on Facebook, right? There's people who scroll Facebook. And you look at the likes and the comments and that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of people who scroll there's probably 3 to 5 times as many people who look and don't like it, right?
Right.
But they see it and they're watching for weeks, months, years at a time. And then all of a sudden something snaps and they're like, you know what, I got to reach out to this guy. Let me see if I can go and send some money his way or partner up on a deal or joint venture or something along those lines. And so that's what you got to realize. You just need to stick with it, right? You're planting seeds all the time. And some of those seeds take root right away. Many of them get blown away, get burned up by the sun, never take root. And some of them take root in 5-10 years down the road.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then it's just a phone call conversational way sometimes for people to kind of grow the decision between doing the investment versus not doing the investment and kind of profit from there from years to come. And so you mentioned a lot that there's a lot to unpack over here for us. Tell us a little bit more about, but before we kind of get into that, tell us a little bit more about your first commercial deal. Like, how did you decide that multifamily is your thing? And this is something that you get into, not only the multifamily realm, but also like the deep value adds product.
Yeah, good question. So I got into buying. So I was kind of in real estate either in the brokerage world. I interned for a big home builder, and then I had my painting company. So I was kind of like in the trade since 2005. I started investing in real estate in 2009 and bought my first, but it was all single family or like duplexes. And then in 2012, I came across a property up in Cleveland, Ohio, that was an 8-unit apartment building listed for $50,000. And I ended up buying it for $30,000 or $32,000.
Wow.
So I was into it for, I bought it for 30, put another 50 grand worth of work into it, but I was into it for less than $10,000 a door, fully renovated.
Yeah.
And I bought that building, and after I operated it for a year, I realized like this meets my level of ambition. This meets my sense of efficiency that I love. I love going to one location and negotiating with one seller, getting financing on one property instead of 8 properties, right? Looking at one roof instead of 8 roofs, collecting rent from one location instead of 8 locations, driving to meet my contractor at one location instead of 8 locations. It was just from a sense of efficiency and scale, it made so much more sense than investing in single family for what my ambitions were, what my goals were. I have a lot of friends who made a lot of money in single family real estate, and that's great for them. But for me, I wanted multifamily because of the amount of scale that's happening to it. And like some of my friends flip 400 or 500 houses a year. Like,
wow,
I own over 4,000 doors, but guess what? That's only like 60 buildings that I own. Right.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, they're working way harder than I am. I just feel like I'm working smarter in some capacity. But if one deal doesn't go through, it affects my income more than, one deal not going through for them. So just kind of, you got to weigh it out and see what makes sense.
And then you talked about
your ambitions.
Yeah. And then you talked about your ambition multiple times over here. And what is that for you long term?
Yeah. So it always changes, right? Like I used to set long-term goals. There's what I want to be when I'm 65 years old and ready for retirement or so, which, I used to think retirement was a thing that you get to, and I have zero desire to ever retire. What am I going to do? I'm not the kind of guy who's going to sit on a beach and sip cocktails all day for 35 years of my life. It's not going to happen. So, and then even goals that I set out that were 10 or 15 years down the road, and then you try to like backtrack it, right? So I'd set like 65-year-old goals, and here's Tim when I'm, 40 years old, and then here's where I want to be when I'm 30 years old, and so I'd backtrack the goals, and then here's my 12-month goals, and then my monthly goals, and hypothetically, you do the monthly activities and you hit those monthly goals, then eventually you'll hit your annual goals, then your 5-year goals, and your 20-year goals, and everything else, right? It falls in line. But what I found is that goals and achievement, it's not like an additive subtractive type thing, it's a multiplier. So and you got to keep your head down, right? Like a lot of times people think success is like, all right, hey, it's a stepping stone, right? It just go up, and it's a perfectly 45-degree line. You just keep on doing things and you have added incremental success. It's not like that. It's a pretty flat line until all of a sudden it goes straight up and like a rocket ship.
Right.
And I flatlined for a long time, probably 7 or 8 years until finally it started going upward. And then I've had, astronomical growth over the past few years because I just kept my head down. But what I found, especially since that it started going vertical, was that my goals changed dramatically. My goal used to be $100 million real estate portfolio. Last year, I took down $100 million deal a single deal that was $100 million.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden that stuff changes pretty dramatically. So I don't even set long-term goals anymore. I just set kind of like 24 to 36 month goals. And I really don't go out longer than that. So, my 24-month goal right now is to hit $1 billion in assets that I own. I'm at about 400 million right now.
Nice.
And that'll get me to a certain level where here's the thing, like your lifestyle doesn't change that much.
No.
After you get to a certain point, if you can make $1 million a year, I don't know. So what if you make $5 million? What else can you afford? There's not that much more, right? Yeah. I live on the beach, right? I have a house up in the mountains. I even bought an island, 110 acre island.
Nice.
That I'm doing like short-term rentals on and just kind of having some fun with.
Nice.
And I guess my point is, like, I don't know. I don't set long-term goals, and my goals have changed pretty dramatically once I hit my financial goals, because that was always the driver for me. Now I'm more looking at lifestyle and what do I want to spend my time on.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's the freedom of time comes after freedom of financials. So you mentioned about like all these years that there's a lot of, it sounds like you're a type of person who's learning forward, like falling forward, learning from your mistake, especially, thank you for sharing, like sometimes you can be flatlining, and all these years you are incrementally increasing your knowledges. It's just at one particular use of time, you remember the way you're doing over there. Can you kind of share with us a little bit more, maybe pick a mistake that you have made in the past, a failure, the vast amount of, lesson that you learned from that. Because I remember one of these shows that they always talk about, like the biggest failure show or something like that. So was wondering if you can kind of pinpoint a particular, deal or incident.
Yeah, I mean, there's countless, right?
Yeah.
People think failure is the opposite of success. No, it's part of success. You cannot have success without failure. Yeah. And so maybe that's a big lesson learned, right? Trying to not fail, and then realizing, like, guess what? Not taking action is far more failure than actually taking action and messing up, right? Because even in real estate, you're like, all right, what if I buy this $100,000 house and it doesn't go right? Then I could lose $100,000. Yeah. You're not going to lose $100,000. Like, worst case scenario, you fire sale it for $90,000 and you lose 10 grand, right? And so we create this bigger monster in our heads than it really is in real life, So like that was something, letting fear kind of get in my way. I think it would go back to like a big lesson that I learned is like, I was never content. I was always, very ambitious, wanting to like light the world on fire. And for me, you don't hit your goals usually that you set in 12 months, right? We're usually pretty ambitious of what we want to accomplish in the next 12 months. And we overestimate what we can accomplish in 12 months typically, but we grossly underestimate what we can do in 3 to 5 years. That whole compound effect, that snowball effect, is a very real thing. And if you just put your head down and you say, hey, here's what I want to do in 12 months and here's what I want to do in 5 years, I bet most people probably would not reach their 12-month goal, but I bet they would just completely their 5-year goal, right? I think they would probably 3 to 5x it if they just kept their head down. But what happens is most people in that 2 to 3 year range, before they really become an expert with what they're doing, they're like, oh, this isn't working. I've given it a year. I've given it 2 years. It's not working. I'm jumping ship. And they go and start something new. And they're never an expert at anything because they've never given the time to become an expert. It takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. It's a statistical fact. Right. And if you think about 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 hours per year. That means you need at least 5 years of something before you really become an expert at it. And so if you want to get involved in real estate or start a new business, you got to dedicate 3 to 5 years minimum before you say, hey, I'm going to go and, jump ship and try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so switch gear a little bit, that you're great at building your team. Can you kind of recall back when and who did you hire as your first employee? And then what advice you have for small business owners for their first couple hires?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. I think that has been one of the biggest game changers, is surrounding myself with a great team and hiring great people and bringing on A players into my organization. That's what really allows for massive growth and better lifestyle for the business owner as well. I can go on vacation and not have to worry about somebody or, the business falling or failing or, coming off the wheels kind of a thing, because I know great people are watching. In fact, it's probably gonna be better when I come back than when I left.
Right.
But yeah, I think when I was a solo entrepreneur until about 2015. And wow. I went out to a real estate mastermind, so before I was doing everything, right? I'm trying to find the deals. I'm raising the money on it. I'm doing due diligence. I'm signing the closing documents. I'm meeting the contractors. I'm evicting tenants. I'm posting notices. I'm going to eviction court. I'm meeting the bailiff whenever they get kicked out. Sometimes I'm swinging the hammer and doing the cleaning and doing all that stuff on my own. Going to the properties to collect rent, handling the maintenance. I was doing all of it. Yeah. And I see these big businesses. I'm like, how do they become a big business? And the way that they do it is they build a team. And so I went out to this real estate, or it was a mastermind, and there were about 15 entrepreneurs sitting in a room, going around for 2 days, just talking about their biggest hurdle that they were facing in business at that time. And mine was hands down. I was just, trying to burn the midnight oil and trying to just go and trying to do more, but I was confined by the 24 hours I had in a day. Yeah. And so when it came around to me, they're like, dude, you just got to get some stuff off your plate. Why don't you hire an assistant? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, just hire an assistant and give them a bunch of stuff that doesn't make money. And I was like, all right, well, it's one, got to be more complicated than that. And then two, I made six figures for the first time ever in 2014. Yeah. And, an assistant's going to cost me probably $35,000 to $40,000. Right. Yeah. And so in Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm thinking, that's going to take about a third of my income away. And now what do I do? They're like, listen, it's not a $36,000 risk. It's a $3,000 per month risk. Right. Can you risk it for 2 months? And if it doesn't work out, you let them go and you go back to banging your head against the wall. Right. And I was like, it's a different way of looking at it, right? It's a different perspective from somebody who did have a big team, who had the lifestyle, who went on vacation for 6 weeks at a time to exotic places all over the world, and their business kept on spinning, right? Yeah. And so I was like, all right, maybe they know something that I don't know. Yeah. And that's what I did. I ended up coming back. I hired an assistant, and I gave them everything on my that I did on a weekly basis, everything that didn't make money. So all non-revenue generating activities went to the assistant. That became their job description. Yeah. It was just everything that I was doing that didn't make money. I focused on the things that actually made money in business, because I was the business owner, right? I needed to go and drive revenue. So once all that stuff was off my plate, all of a sudden I could just focus on revenue generating activities. And guess what? All of a sudden revenue spiked, right? Yeah. And now I'm making more money. And then you can hire somebody else. The next hire that I would suggest would be either like a sales or acquisitions kind of a person, right? Whoever can drive more revenue. Because once you have revenue solves all problems, right? You get in a lawsuit, no problem. Hire an attorney, right? Just pay money for an attorney to go battle it. If there's constraints on your team, no problem. I have money. I can go hire somebody else to come back on, give everybody a little bit of relief. Slip and fall, liability, like anything like that. Money solves all problems, offers growth, offers, you could put it towards personal education. You could put it towards marketing dollars. You could buy assets, like residual income producing assets. Money solves all problems. Revenue solves all problems. So when you drive revenue, everything else falls into place.
That's awesome. Great. That's actually a really good executable tips that Tim just gave it to us over there. And now switch gear a little bit more. So in real estate investing, a lot has to be doing with picking the market. Do you agree with that? Like picking the right market to invest it in is very important for real estate.
Not totally. I know a lot of people are very data driven on certain markets and certain economies. Here's the thing. Every market has opportunity and every market has obstacles, right? Yeah. And I'm talking about like economic cycles, right? Like I said before, 10 years ago, there were deals everywhere and there was money nowhere. Right. Today, there's money everywhere and deals nowhere. Right. So you got to lean into the different opportunities, right? Like, okay, so now I can get access to more money and cheaper money. Let me go and buy a different kind of property, or you always have to be changing and adjusting and looking at things from a different lens. I've actually been doing a lot more creative finance stuff and seller financing properties now, and that way I can give the seller their number, but it has to be on my terms. No problem. Right. I'll give you your asking price, which I think is kind of high, but I need you to carry back financing at 4% interest only for the next 10 years.
Right.
Are you willing to do that? Yeah. If they're willing to do that, then I don't have to worry about, going and having a recourse loan on my name. I can go and raise money. I can hold the property long enough where, I could pay down enough principal if I decide to pay down principal, or the property will appreciate and I can generate more revenue from it, and a lot of different options, So that's economic cycles. And then from your standpoint of asking about specific markets, listen, I've gotten some of the best and worst returns in war zones, in really tough areas of Cleveland, Ohio. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my point being, a lot of people say location, location, location. And I think that's important. But to me, the number one driver in real estate is wholesale, wholesale, wholesale. Buy it at a wholesale price. Buy it at a discounted price. Because I bought in really rough areas, but I bought so low, I was able to sell it at a higher price and still make a great profit on those deals. I'm in areas that aren't necessarily, Dallas, Texas, or Miami, Florida, or, San Diego, California. I'm in, I don't know, Charleston, South Carolina, Springfield, Illinois, Lafayette, Louisiana, Macon, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. Like I'm in markets that aren't primary markets. Some of them aren't even secondary markets. Some of them are probably more tertiary type markets, which don't have the sexiest statistics, and data behind them of high growth or anything along those lines.
Yeah.
But what I have is I buy at a deep discount. I create appreciation because I put so much sweat equity into my properties. And then I have the nicest properties in town at the lowest cost basis.
Right.
So that way I don't have to charge a premium for rents. I can charge the same rent as everybody else, but because I have the nicest properties, all the tenants come over to my building instead of the buildings across the street. So on a micro level, I can profit and be successful in any market, regardless of what's going on there, as long as you can buy at the right price.
Yeah. And that's actually plays into your strategy a little bit more to invest in maybe like smaller towns, because your building can actually make a name for yourself. So if your building is really nice in Dallas, nobody ever noticed because there's a gazillion other ones that's out there. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I will say, I don't invest in war zones anymore, even C-class areas. You can make money in those. A lot of, numbers look good on paper, but if you're buying for long-term, just get into a good area, right? What's a good area? Decent school district, safe, has some economic viability to it, but it doesn't need to be Orlando, Florida. It doesn't need to be Tampa, Florida. It doesn't need to be, Austin, Texas. It can be Greenville, South Carolina. It can be Cleveland, Ohio. It can be even like other markets where if you're buying it and it cash flows and it kicks off some cash flow, maybe you don't get the appreciation, but you get the cash flow. Or if you're buying for more of appreciation, that's a little bit more speculative. So you need to be aware of that. But you can be down the South, but not have to be in a primary market. You can be in a secondary or tertiary market and still have a very profitable business.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other question I have over here is, over the years, you have building your team to a pretty large team now. What would you say from your stage one of growth of your of your small company into where you are today, stage 2, 3? What should you be kind of expecting as entrepreneurs in terms of helping you transition that pretty rapidly? Because you grow pretty rapidly. What would you kind of suggest people kind of look into for rapid growth? So how is that different from like a stabilized company that just kind of turns?
It looks rapid, but remember, I've been investing since 2009, and I was bad at real estate in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, started getting better. 2016 actually regressed a little bit because I overhired people. And when you overhire and you don't screen them and you don't train them and you don't measure them properly, then all of a sudden you got liabilities, not assets on your team, And I had to actually fire my entire team, well, most of it, twice in 2016.
Wow.
So regressed quite a bit. And then 2017, finally learned from my mistakes and hired the right people, screened them properly, trained them properly, and then measured their performance properly in 2017, 2018, 2019. So a lot of my growth happened in 2017 to today. But I had to lay a foundation of about 8 years of entrepreneurship before it was flatlined until it all of a sudden went like that. So, it takes a decade to become an overnight success. That's the reality of the situation. So, I would say, just get your house in order, right? Like figure out what do you want to do and make a commitment to it first. So you're not going anywhere for 5 years. If you're going to invest in real estate, I'm going to dedicate X number of hours a day to real estate for the next 5 years. And I'm not going to jump ship no matter how hard or difficult or what happens in the market or anything else. Draw a line in the sand and then go start doing some deals, right? Take down an apartment building or take down a rental property, a duplex, a quadplex, a single family, and just keep on buying. You're going to learn more from doing a deal than you ever will from reading about it in a book or taking a course.
Yeah.
And then once you take down that first deal, there are ways to build up a team before you take on employees. Like you could have fractional employees, like you can hire a CPA or a bookkeeper to come in one time every month and just, balance out the books where you don't have to do that. You pay them for 3 hours of their time instead of full time, that same thing's available. You're working with a realtor instead of having in-house acquisitions team, there's a lot of things like that where you can kind of use contracted work before you ever bring things in-house.
And vendor services. Yeah.
Or
definitely.
you joint venture, right? I don't really like partnerships, like getting married over all of your business, but I do like joint ventures, meaning I was in a partnership, right? And we had exclusive agreement to only do deals with each other. We could never do deals with anybody else. And that ended up going south because it just sounds bad, right? It sounds like they can't do anything outside of me. I can't do anything outside of them. And if life happens, then all of a sudden, personalities clash and we had to liquidate 140 doors that I built up from 2012 to 2016.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I liquidated them all and I pressed the reset button in 2015, 2016 again. And my point being is like, if you joint venture though, on a deal by deal basis, you can partner up with an A player and say, hey, listen, I'm really good at the sales side and the raising money. You're really good at operations. How about, we work together and we come up with some sort of equity split on the operations of this deal. And let's take down one deal and you open up an LLC and you can carve up the equity any way that you want. You hire an attorney and they can do it for $1,000. Take title of the property in that LLC. And then you see what it's like to partner with that person,
right?
See what it's like working with that person. When times are good, when times are bad, go through that cycle and then go do another deal. And then another one, and then another one. And then eventually, once you've been through enough deals, you're like, you know what, let's just keep on doing deals together. It's like you're with them because you love them, not because you're contractually obligated to them across your entire portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So you can keep on doing more deals with them if you like it. And if you don't, hey, great, because you only own 2 deals with them and you don't have to work with them on any other project.
Right. And once they exited, they exited. And then what are some hiring golden rules that you can kind of share with our listeners so that they can shave off maybe like 3-5 years of resetting?
Yep. I've alluded to this a couple times. One is you got to screen people, right? Early on, I was king of the dipshits, right? Anybody who raised their hand, any of my buddies who raised their hand, I was like, hey, I'm looking to hire somebody. They'd raise their hand because they had less going on than what I had going on.
Yeah.
And I hired downward,
Yeah.
And because of that, guess what? All of a sudden your business starts going downward.
Right.
When I started hiring people who were as good or better than what I could do, that's all of a sudden when my business started on a positive trajectory. So you got to screen your employees, right? So put it out there. You don't have to screen them. Somebody else could do that. You can hire, there's HR companies and headhunters out there who can help you, find somebody for whatever role that you're looking to fill if you want to go that route, or, you could do it yourself if you want and you're limited on resources, but, have them do something, have them, hey, thanks for inquiring. Send me over your resume and list 3 things of why you'd be right for this job and 2 references. Yeah. And see who responds. Chances are 20% of the people are even going to do and follow directions. If they can't follow simple directions like that, there's no way they're going to be able to work for you and execute to the level that you want, right? So number 1 would be like screening them. Number 2 was something I was horrible at, was once they're hired, I'd be like, all right, go. And just assume that everybody else had the same resourcefulness or knew what they were doing. And like, I never trained anybody. Right. And so you got to train people, and it's not that complicated. Have them shadow you, right? And watch you do it. And then you shadow them, watch them do it. And then they can go and do it on their own. Right. And if you're on a computer, it's very easy to just kind of create a Loom video of just recording yourself going through the process. And then you could give them that recording. And once you do that once, you can hire anybody and give them the same recording. And now you're starting to create a vault of processes and procedures of how you run your business. But you got to train people. You can't expect somebody to come in and just know everything that you know. And you've been, I was in the business for 6-7 years before I ever hired anybody. And I just expected them to know what I know on day one. It's not realistic. And then the third thing is, once they're trained, you have to continue measuring their performance, right? What you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So there needs to be some sort of metric in place that measures their performance. It's a little bit harder to do on less quantifiable jobs, like an executive assistant, right? That's a little bit tougher to measure that. Unless you got them in charge of like your, scheduling appointments or doing some marketing type efforts or doing some sort of, clearing out your inbox, your email, like zero inbox. That's easy. So things like that you can measure. You can also, it's easy measure, like salespeople, right? Hey, how many offers did you put in this week? Your job is to put in 50 offers every single week. How many did you get? Oh, I hit 42. All right. Well, you're not hitting your metrics. What are we going to do next week? All right, I'm going to hit 50 next week. 53, great. You hit your goal, right? But if without something to aim for, they don't know what they need to be doing, and it keeps them focused on the revenue generating activities, coming full circle to what we talked about earlier, keeps them focused on the things that actually make money that you want them focused on. And if you can keep them inside the lines and focused on, because there's always noise, there's always stuff, filler things that can take you away. If you have them obsessing over just 2 or 3 metrics, the only things that are quantifiable and move the needle on that job, your company will grow substantially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to focus on the fewer things, but really kind of focus it really deep. Awesome, Tim. We're almost to the end of our interview here. We usually wrap our interview here to ask, because I know you have small children. And so what are you doing today to help them understanding financial literacy?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, a great something to ponder on. I think, you asking that question shows that you even care. And I think that's probably step number one, right? Like actually caring. And your kids are going to be just fine just because you actually care and you're asking those kinds of questions. It shows that you have the emotional intelligence, right, in order to kind of support and ask those questions and engage with your kids and all that kind of stuff. Another thing is just realize that they're watching you, and they're watching you all the time. I have a couple pictures of my daughter. One, I'm on my laptop, up at the kitchen counter, and then she goes and grabs her little play laptop and sits next to me when she was 3 or 4 years old, 2 years old, whatever. There's another one of me on a phone call, walking around, pacing the house, and she's got her little pink, fake phone, pacing the house right behind me, walking right next to me, and that's kind of an eye opener of like how much they do watch you, and so be the example, right, that you want your kids to see. So I think that's a big one. And then I was pondering this quite a bit back in 2017. I was coming back from a real estate mastermind event and reading The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And I was like, man, these principles are so good in this book. I wish I could, and I was 31 or 30. Yeah, I think I was 31 at the time. And I remember thinking like, my daughter was 2 years old or about to be 2. I was like, I wish that I got this when I was 2 years old instead of 31 years old. And I was like, and so I got off the plane. I started Googling different personal development books for kids, achievement books for kids, success books for kids. And I couldn't find anything. There were some things, there's a lot on the golden rule and treating people nicely and being fair and sharing your toys and things like that, and being respectful. But there wasn't anything on entrepreneurial thought philosophies. You know? And I think when, the universe plants that seed in your head of, hey, this doesn't exist, you need to go and make something like this. I sat on that idea for a couple of years and then ended up partnering up with my wife and another very good friend of ours. Awesome. And they kind of wrote books. And so we have a library of kids books called
Awesome.
Little Legacy Library. And they're essentially children's versions of a lot of the classic personal development books that we've read. Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Richest Man in Babylon, The Power of Positive Thinking. And so yeah, it's littlelegacylibrary.com, but you can go on there and their books kind of, you know, they're picture books. They're kind of like Berenstain Bears age, I would say, like 4 years old to like 10 years old. But realistically, I get messages from the grown-up parents who read these to their kids and are like, dude, don't tell anybody, but I got a lot out of that book. Like, thank you. Like, I learned something.
Awesome. That's awesome.
So so we're really proud of it. We have some workbooks and stuff that go with it. And we're trying to that kind of just launched. We haven't really given it the attention and time that it deserves, but we have 4 books out there right now, and we're looking to really pump that over the course of the next couple of years here. So, but yeah, that's something that's an actual resource, an actual tool that you can have for your kids, and share these books, share these insights with them, at least start planting the seed at an early age. You know, they say that personalities are developed all within the first 5 years. But by the time a kid's 5 years old. So we wanted something where they're, you know, 3, 4 years old, you can start reading these books and talking about concepts and ideas and strategies and just philosophies that we might not have been raised with, that you know, let somebody else kind of convey that message for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question I have is, what do you do with work-life balance? Because you allude to, like, Tim, I know, like, I can probably talk to you for like 5 hours. I can just come from this hour, but what are you doing for, you know, work-life balance? And it sounds like at the beginning of your career, when you're single, maybe young, you like really spend a lot of time working, right? And then you kind of built to a point where you're like, okay, there's not enough hour, then you hire some people. And then now there's a deliberate way of living for you. So how do you define like a work-life balance, and how you kind of achieve that with children and successful business? Yeah.
I don't think anybody's perfect at it. And I think balance is kind of it's a tough word. It means everything's equal, you know, like I believe more in like harmony. I think you're always going to be leading with some element of life. Maybe sometimes that's work and you're pushing real hard on work. Maybe sometimes that's relationships. Maybe sometimes that's your health. Maybe sometimes that's your, you know, spirit or personal development and mindset side of things. But even when you're leading with one of them, it doesn't mean you need to neglect everything else, you know? So, you know, this came about when I, you know, realized my daughter wanted to play with me one night. Right. And I was like, yeah. Hang on a second, baby, like after dinner and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, hang on a second. I was on my phone, text messaging, and she went over to the playroom. She's playing by herself. And I looked down at my phone after I sent the message, and I realized like it wasn't important. It wasn't urgent. And whether I know it or not, I'm planting a seed in my daughter's head that work is more important than her, you know, by every time that I do that. And so, you know, like the next day I felt so guilty. I like canceled everything the next day. I think we went to the zoo and hung out and all this other stuff. And I realized like, oh, I time block, meaning I schedule it in my calendar, time for work and appointments and, you know, podcasts and phone calls and coffee meetings and all this other stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And I do that for work, but I don't do that for my own personal health of working out, exercising. I don't do it for my own personal mindset of meditating and reading and personal development. And I don't do it for my family. Yeah. So like that, how you spend your time indicates what your greatest priorities are. And so if your priority is your family, then you need to schedule time for your family. And so like I schedule and I time block for my family. The reason we're doing this in the middle of the afternoon is because I do not do appointments in the evening, right? Like I'm hanging out with the family, I'm hanging out with the kids and the wife, and I time block evenings. Hey, Tim, can you jump on a podcast or take a phone call? No, I can't, because I'm already booked. I got something on the calendar. And so I think understanding that there's, you know, a few pillars of your life. For me, there's 4 major pillars. One is, you know, financial, relational, it's my family, my friends, physical, you know, health-wise. And then the other one's like more like emotional, mental, spiritual kind of thing. And so I'm thinking like, what do I time block every single day for each one of those things, and spend at least, you know, 30 minutes to an hour on each one of those to make sure that there's always something you're gonna be leading with, but at the end of the day, you don't want to neglect any of those things. And so time blocking has been a game changer for me.
That's awesome.
I'm not perfect at it, right? Like I
Yeah.
pick up the phone at dinner time sometimes, and at the same time during the middle of the day, I don't pick up the phone because I'm out with the kids and I'm out with the fam and we're having lunch or
Right.
something out and on the middle of the day on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I lean both ways, but like when I'm in the zone with family, I try to be all in the zone with family, and when I'm all in the zone on work, I try to be all in the zone on work. And like right now it's kind of tough because my little guy's home and he's watching a show and he sees daddy at home, but I'm also working right now. And so like I just moved down to Charleston about a little over a year ago, and I don't have like an actual office or set up and everything down here yet. Like that's not in the house. And so I'm trying to kind of, my point
Find
is
the balance.
it's never perfect, right?
Yeah.
It's never
Harmony. Yeah.
ideal. And I'm
word.
trying to, it's always something you got to be cognizant of and conscious of and working towards, but
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for your time today. And how there's just so many things to unpack over here. And so how does our listener viewer check you out, Tim, and kind of engage or further more from your content and you?
Yeah, I mean, same way that we connected on social media, like Instagram and Facebook. I'm very active on both of those. Connect with me there. I have a YouTube channel called Legacy Wealth where we're always putting out some content and talking about entrepreneurship, lifestyle by design, wealth building strategies, and obviously real estate too. But yeah, check out YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Just connect with me on any one of those, and just always trying to provide value and lead with value any way that I can. And if there's ways that I can help you, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you. You asked a lot of good questions. Thank you for all those good questions.
Thank you. And this wraps up another episode of 10,000 Roads to Financial Independence. And then we're going to put all the resources about Tim on our show notes down below in our YouTube channel and in our podcast as well. Thank you so much.